my distinguished senior colleague, Minister for Planning, Professor Hassan Iqbal, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished intellectuals, absolutely delighted to be here this morning to participate in this big rethink. And of course, it's a very difficult act to follow the insights of Professor Hassan Iqbal, who gave a very inspiring address here. But I do have one counter to his. I also have Allama Iqbal to throw at you, which I think is appropriate for the big rethink. Allama Sahib says, "Teri dua se qaza to badal nahi sakti, मगर है इससे ये मुमकिन कि तू बदल जाए। तेरी दुआ है कि हो तेरी आरजू मुमकिन, मेरी दुआ है तेरी आरजू बदल जाए।" ये जो आरजू बदलना है, दिस इज द बिग रीथिंक. वी हैव टू रियली रीथिंक what we desire for our country, because all the easy insights have been achieved, all the easy solutions have been proposed, and somehow they are not working. So in the 76th year of Pakistan's founding, we are still at this impasse. Most of us think that Pakistan needs a rethink, that Pakistan's state, its economy is not delivering. Yes, it is delivering for a small substrata of the elite, but for most of the 240 million people who have been counted in this year's census, it is not delivering. So what do we do? So the first rethink I have to offer is the rethink that was forced upon us, the government of Pakistan, last year by Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Essentially, Pakistan has had, if you think about it, three distinct phases of energy sources. So the first is late 60s and 70s with the large hydel dams that we built, Tarbela and Mangla, and the hydel electricity was the principal source and foundation of our electricity production. But that proved to be insufficient, or again, perhaps because of the state's different challenges, we were unable to expand the hydel. So in early 90s, we went to this new IPP mode in which we invested, private sector came in for the first time and invested in thermal energy. This is oil-based, so it's diesel oil or furnace oil, because at that time oil was cheap, easy to import. So we went ahead, and so early 90s we went into this IPP thermal-based electricity production, and then of course that proved to be insufficient by the first decade of this century. So in 2013, in PMLN's previous government, when we analyzed, we discovered that at that time coal and gas, liquefied natural gas, were the most economical fuels, and we invested in that. So we have now imported coal-based electricity plants and liquefied natural gas-based energy plants, and that's another story that I will add here. But what happened last year? Last year was that when Russia invaded Ukraine, and so the first thing that happened was this turmoil in energy markets, in which principally the stoppage of gas from Russia to Europe caused this massive disruption in which coal, which was deemed to be a dying fuel, no one wanted coal anyway, it was bad for the environment supposedly, suddenly increased 400% in price. So that's the first shock to Pakistan's new energy system, that imported coal, which we thought would serve us for many decades, was suddenly not economical. And then the second shock was that once the gas stopped to Europe, European countries and many other countries, they sucked in all the liquefied natural gas, and it was not to be had at any price. It was simply not available for until 2025. So the two pillars of our new energy policy, the 2013 to 18 policy, suddenly crumbled from beneath us. So we were forced to do a big rethink. So the big rethink in Pakistan's electricity production, which we did last year, right, that henceforth Pakistan's electricity generation will not be based on imported fuels. That's the big rethink. So the big rethink is that imported coal is out, imported liquefied natural gas is out, oil is out. So what are we left with? We are left with 5 sources. 4 of them, of course, purely domestic, 5th is semi-domestic. So, of course, as Professor Hassan Iqbal pointed out, the two renewables, solar and wind. They have their own crises and issues, but yes, solar, wind. Then we have, of course, hydel, that again with cooperation from our iron brother China, we were able to begin construction of both the Amir Basha and Dasu dams, which will be available sometime in 2028, 2029. But yes, hydel is back into the mix in a big way. That's the 3rd source. 4th is the one that had a beginning back in as Professor Hassan Iqbal pointed out, back in 2014 was the exploitation of Thar coal. But in the last year, until this government took office in April 22, Thar was producing 660 megawatts of electricity from Thar coal. In the last year, since April 2022, we have added, ladies and gentlemen, 2,000 megawatts of Thar coal-based productions. Projects that had been in the pipelines in 2016, 17, 18 were finally completed. So Thal Nova was completed, Tel was completed, 330 megawatt each. And of course, the big proof of concept of Thar coal's viability is the Shanghai Electric Thar coal plant at Block 1, 1,320 megawatts, which Alhamdulillah has been in production since February of this year. So there is no longer any doubt of Thar coal's viability for electricity production, and Thar coal will, we expect, hope and will work for that it will serve Pakistan's electricity generation needs for many decades to come. And the 5th, that is once again back into the energy mix, is nuclear. Again, Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif back in 2014-15 laid the foundation stone of K2 and K3 nuclear plants. K2 came into operation back in 2020. K3 came into commercial operation this year. So now we have 2 very reliable nuclear power plants which have in very short order become the foundation of our electricity generation during winter, because we don't have hydel in the winter from the north. So from the south we have. So these are the 5 sources, ladies and gentlemen. That's the big rethink. That from henceforth, at least this is the policy that we will bequeath to the next elected government, is that these 5 sources are the way to go, which of course reduce the burden on our exchequer, also help the environment by increase in large-scale solar, and of course wind, which has been there for a while, but again the pricing mechanisms have massively changed since 2014-15. Solar has become much cheaper, wind has become much cheaper. So we are in this strange and unique position where the desirable has become affordable. And so we want to go again in large scale solar and also large scale wind. We have, of course, a well-known corridor in Sindh, in Jhampir, but also we have corridors in central North Punjab and also parts of Balochistan, which are there to be exploited. But this rethink, we hope, will not only reduce the burden on the exchequer, but also, of course, for many years to come, gradually but surely bring down the price of electricity in this country. As more of these domestic source-based electricity comes online, we are already feeling some effect that despite massive devaluation in the last year or so, we have not raised electricity prices since September 2022. So we are holding the electricity prices, the base tariff is holding, mainly because thermal coal has come in, nuclear has come in. So that nearly, and also last year we inaugurated the Khurram hydroelectric power, another 720 megawatts. So the injection of new domestic-based electricity has allowed us to hold the electricity prices since September 22, and we hope to hold them barring some unforeseen disasters, nauzubillah, so this will continue to, and some of you who, of course, a lot of us read our electricity bills very carefully and minutely, you will have noticed that during most of this winter, the fuel price adjustment was negative. We actually returned money to the consumer, precisely because we were able to hold these domestic-based electricity to the maximum and thereby reduce the burden on the consumer. So yes, in electricity generation, there has been a big rethink, and we hope that whatever government the people of Pakistan will elect in the next elections will continue this policy because it makes sense. I have so much more to say on electricity, but I have some other issues to add on the big rethink. The first rethink is that we have to prepare for some creative destruction. It is very clear that the current structures of our governance and the current structures of our economy, while benefiting a few, are not delivering. I mean, one small electricity-related issue is, and of course I'm asked this question so frequently, we have a lot of electricity generation capacity which is old, which is inefficient. In some cases, it is a crime to run those plants, which are so expensive. But yes, in parts of the summer, we run them when the demand rises. So what does one do to these plants? We have to phase them out, which will require, of course, some political courage. Jobs are involved. There are some regional sensitivities also. But we have to phase out what is no longer economical for our country, which is no longer delivering for our country. Similarly, we have to do a rethink, and of course this forum is perhaps an appropriate one, is to see how we can open our economy to the rest of the world. Although it may not seem like it, but Pakistan is a massively overprotected economy. And we have to really think about, both government and business, of how to open ourselves up so that we get new systems of management, so we get new technology, and of course, by doing so, create reasonable and productive jobs for our young men and women who are coming into the job market in millions each year. So this open economy should be part of the big rethink that this very distinguished audience will be pondering today and tomorrow. The second rethink is, and maybe it is not a rethink or just a reaffirmation, is that the experience of 2013 to 2022, let's not add this government that took office in 20. The experience of 2013 to 2022 should lead us to rethink that this old nostrum that democracy doesn't work in this country should be thrown out. Because as Professor Hassan Iqbal said, I want to repeat this, between 2013 to 18, the government of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif and then Shahid Abbasi solved the 4 issues that we inherited at the beginning of our government in 2013. Namely, we fought terrorism, prevailed. We brought peace to Karachi, prevailed. We brought CPEC to this country, prevailed. And ladies and gentlemen, the crippling energy shortages that we inherited in 2013, we prevailed over them, both in electricity and gas generation. And that was an elected government. To say that this democracy doesn't work in this country has now, in my view, been proven wrong. And there was a 5th part, since it's so much in the news, and most people tend to forget it. Then 2013 to 16, the government of Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif completed an IMF program which was unique in Pakistan's history, that each year inflation decreased and growth increased. Each year. So in 2013 to 14, 14, 15, 15, 16, each year inflation decreased. In fact, 15, 16, if some of you can imagine or recall, probably one of the lowest inflation rates in Pakistan's history, 2.8%. So facts say that whatever our views about politicians, they deliver it. But then there's a second lesson of 2018 to 2022. 13 to 18, democracy works. 18 to 22, hybrid regime doesn't work. So there are lessons to be drawn as we go forward toward this big rethink. Similarly, and that's my final submission to this distinguished audience, we have to rethink our foreign policy, which seems to me that it's stuck in the 1980s. The world has changed massively and will change. So the Cold War ended, US and Western countries are out of Afghanistan. The West versus China dialectic is heating up each year. So yes, it is a tightrope, but we have to rethink our foreign policy, and all the old comforting nostrums have to be thrown out. So my regrets that I'm throwing out more questions and answers, but I'll leave you with this hope expressed by Thomas Paine 250 years ago, is that we have to believe, as Paine said, that we have it in our power to begin the world over again. So this is the belief that we have to have in ourselves, despite whatever the external challenges. Belief as a nation, belief as a republic, that yes, this is bad and that is bad, yes. But we have to have the belief that this, and again, if I might recall Abraham Lincoln at Gettysburg, that maybe the events of May 9th will lead us to this positive outcome. As Lincoln said, that this nation will have a new birth of freedom, ladies and gentlemen. So if we have the belief in ourselves to do so, and have this new birth of freedom, and belief in our democracy, I think we can not only endure, but we shall inshallah prevail. Pakistan Pandana.